Today in the Texas Tribune Weekend Insider. Rob Will was sentenced to death for the 2000 shooting of a Harris County Sheriff's deputy. Will says the jury convicted the wrong man. Brandi Grissom looks at his case and why he claims he's innocent. Then Becca Aaronson explains why the long-term disaster recovery effort funded by the federal government following Hurricane Ike has barely gotten off the ground.
Rob Will was convicted in 2002 of killing a Harris County Sheriff's deputy. He and an accomplice of his were robbing parts off of a car, and when police came to arrest them, each of them took off in different directions, officers chasing both of them. One of the officers ended up being shot to death, and Rob Will was convicted of that murder even though no one saw it happen and there was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime. Both at his trial and in the decades since then, Rob Will has argued that it was the man he was with that night, who was the son of a Houston police officer, who was the actual shooter who killed the sheriff's deputy. At his trial, Rob's lawyers presented some witnesses who admitted that the other man had confessed to them that he had committed this crime. And since the trial, even more people have come forward to say that this other man confessed to them that he was the shooter in this case. Rob Will is claiming now that, that he is actually innocent and that his lawyers up to this point have been ineffective in assisting him because they had not done a thorough enough investigation to bring forward these affidavits from these witnesses earlier in the process. But the trouble for Will is that it's very late in the appeals process for him. And a judge in January ruled that even though he thought Will had some very serious claims of actual innocence, there was nothing he could do about it because so many mistakes had been made in the appellate process for Will up to that point that he felt hamstrung. Rob Will's fate sort of depends on what happens with a case out of Arizona. In that case, the defendant is making some very similar claims to those that Rob is making, in that he had ineffective assistance of counsel. What the Supreme Court decides to do in that case will likely have a large effect on what happens with Will's case going forward.
So in 2008, it was a horrible hurricane season for Texas. Hurricane Dolly hit South Texas, and Hurricane Ike hit Galveston, Houston, and went all the way up to Pennsylvania, causing the third most expensive damage in U.S. history from a storm. The U.S. Congress decided to allocate $3 billion to Texas to help them with the long-term recovery efforts, which is after FEMA and the other emergency teams rolled out. 2 different state agencies were supposed to oversee the program, one the non-housing projects and one the housing projects. Basically, the result was bureaucratic chaos. People didn't really know what exactly was needed for them to complete these projects, and there weren't requirements for the contracts, so most didn't have benchmarks, performance measures, or completion dates set. So everyone was kind of taking their time to make sure that they were in compliance, but at the same time, no one was really getting it just right or knowing what they needed to do. As of October 2011, they'd only spent 10% of the total funds. There was a really long process and battle with the federal government for the release of round 2, and the state basically had to sign a conciliation agreement. The agreement requires the state to put contracts in place that have deadlines and to redo the analysis of the housing needs. So round 2, pretty much everyone agrees, is on track.